Hello there, everyone. This video here is pretty much going to be for Game Freak or the Pokemon Company, whoever decides what content goes into the game and how it works, as well as for Smogon and their followers slash supporters. I simply just want to take the time to talk about game balance right now. And Pokemon is a very imbalanced game. As of late, everything that Game Freak or the Pokemon Company has been doing in terms of competitiveness for the Pokemon game has only been put into the game for the purpose of VGC. Game Freak and pretty much Pokemon only recognizes VGC as the only competitive format that the Pokemon games currently has. That is simply not true. Singles is also a competitive format. Doubles is also a competitive format outside of VGC. And I'm not sure of competitive formats for triples or rotation battles, inverse battles, or any of the other awkward stuff. But I'm sure there is also a community for that as well. And with so many different Pokemon and so many different moves, abilities, stats, and all these interactions, everything has to come across as balanced and equal, and is not. One thing that they want to talk about was Stealth Rock and how it just completely unbalances the game. Basically what Stealth Rocks does, it's a move that does damage to anything that switches in on it, and it's not really a bad thing because there are other things like spikes and stealth, or spikes and toxic spikes that also does the exact same thing. But Stealth Rock does damage based on what resists rock or what's weak to it. For example, you have Pokemon that are 4 times resistant to it that only take 3.1% damage. Some that just naturally resist that take 6.25. Anything that's neutral takes 12.5. Anything that's weak takes 25%, and anything that's double weak takes 50%. Now that's on a switch in. This isn't just like, you know, you switched your Articuno into my Stealth Rock or into my Rock slot and you took a bunch of damage. This is just when a Pokemon switches and they lose between 3 to 50% of their health on a switch in. That's not balanced and should not exist in a game where switching is one of the things that you're going to be doing most of the time. Now there are some ways they can possibly fix this, and that's changing the way Stealth Rock actually works when in battle. For example, why not make Stealth Rock do a clean 6.25% on anything that switches in? That's roughly the damage that the first stage of Toxic does every time a Pokemon switches in. That's not a problem because it hits everything equally, and it kind of replaces spikes in terms of having to set up multiple layers. It also technically doesn't also replace spikes because you can actually set up 3 layers of spikes, which gives you 25% damage, or 1 layer of spike that does 12.5%. I do think the 12.5% on 1 layer of spike is also a lot of damage. I think that should also be 6% as well. But for spikes to get that huge damage, you have to use it 3 times. Stealth Rocks, you only have to use it once, and you can potentially cripple half the Pokemon in the game. Another way they can fix this is simply making Stealth Rocks to make it to when a Pokemon switches in, that Pokemon takes the damage and then Stealth Rocks goes away. For example, they could leave it the way it is now, and whenever Pokemon switches in on it, Stealth Rocks simply just goes away, and if your opponent wants Stealth Rocks again, they have to set it up again in order to get the effect. Now, this here is still a very good effect, and I still think that it should probably not be more than 12% damage on anything, but it goes away. I think Stealth Rocks should go away after Pokemon switches in, regardless if it's a nerfed version of it or just the way it is now, because we're still talking a 1-turn move setup that is very hard to stop, and you get so much capitalization on it. It's really hard to punish the use of the move. In videos that you guys may have seen, I made the attempt to use on my bird team a bunch of Pokemon with Defog, and it simply just doesn't work. One, the Pokemon that learn Defog usually can't take hits. I mean, you have the awkward exceptions like Suicune and stuff like that. Same thing with Pokemon with Rapid Spin. There simply just aren't a lot of Pokemon that know the move, or a lot of Pokemon that can effectively use the move. You don't want a Pokemon that can't take a hit to use Defog, because, well, it's pretty much going to be useless. You're using a Pokemon that you need just to be able to deal with one move. Where was I going with that? Oh man, I just lost my train of thought right there. But basically, okay. You might have seen the battle where I was going back and forth into a war with somebody between me using Defog and me using Defog and my opponent using Stealth Rocks. For example, my opponent will be at the advantage the entire time because I'm forced to get rid of Stealth Rocks. My opponent loses nothing by using Stealth Rocks. My opponent loses nothing if I decide to use an attack and my opponent uses Stealth Rocks, because at the end of any situation, my opponent is always going to end up with Stealth Rocks on the board. What my opponent could also do is predict my my Defog, which technically isn't even a prediction because I'm using it to get rid of the rocks, and he decides to do something else like set up a Swords Dance or Roar Me Out, or even make a switch of his own into a Pokemon with a Defiant ability or something like that, while me being defensive places me at a disadvantage. Stealth Rocks is a very offensive move and is only used to support offensive Pokemon. I do know that it was made to kind of reduce the switching in the game, because after all, switching is the best possible move you can make in the game. But I don't feel that this needs to be what was the word I'm looking for here? I really don't feel that switching deserves to be harassed the way it is, I guess. For example, we got Pursuit that does more damage if a Pokemon switches out. You know, it's very situational. But we still have things like spikes. We still have things like toxic spikes and other hazards like Sticky Web. The thing is these hazards don't affect everything in the game, and I feel that's the way it's supposed to be. For example, I like using a lot of flying types, more specifically birds, and they can't take a hit to begin with, and Stealth Rocks doesn't make that any better. Stealth Rocks pretty much gives my Pidgeot 75% health when it comes in. It doesn't come in with the full 100%. Effectively, when I'm building my team and putting on it, I look at Pidgeot as having 75% health. My Talonflame effectively has 50% health. It never has 100%. Same thing with Articuno or Moltres or anything else that's weak or double weak to rock type attacks. Basically, for Smogon, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say to like Game Freak in terms of banning that. But for the people who support Smogon, I typically just think Smogon is ran by a bunch of pussies for the most part, and I hate to say that, but I feel it's true, and a lot of their actions that I've been seeing have kind of led me to doing that. For example, the way they ban things is not based on actual statistics or anything else like that. They ban things based on the user community and voting for it. Now, not everybody can vote. Only a handful of people can vote. I'm talking about people with some type of ranking on the Pokemon Showdown. You have to have a certain amount of points in order to vote for it. They don't consider. They say it doesn't matter, but I know they don't consider the opinions of anybody else who's not in like the high 1850s, 1900s for the most part. And a lot of these people favor the use of Stealth Rocks. They want to use Stealth Rocks because it makes their offensive Pokemon more offensive. Think of it like having double Life Orb on a Pokemon. This is kind of what Stealth Rocks is. So when it came time to do a suspect test on it, it was basically to no surprise that it didn't get banned because they like it. It's their favorite move. They're not going to ban it. It also supports their favorite type of Pokemon, which happens to be ground or rock. They don't like dragons because it resists their favorite types attacks. So they want to use things to help hinder them. They don't like flying type Pokemon. And to an extent, I would say Game Freak doesn't even like flying type Pokemon. I mean, Stealth Rocks is a very aggressive move. I mean, they shouldn't even been up for consideration to make. So rather than them banning it, because I've been looking through multiple threads to see if they were actually going to suspect test it, and they said, well, we're not going to suspect test Stealth Rocks. The community doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. And I'm saying, well, there is something wrong with it. You can't claim to have a balanced meta and allow a move to exist that can do potentially 50% to a Pokemon on the switch in. I mean, we really have to look at it. Anything that resists Stealth Rocks, that's technically considered a defensive resist. A Pokemon can take 3%, the least possible amount of damage they can take from Stealth Rocks, while some can take 50%. Their entire meta is based on Pokemon that resist Stealth Rocks. And they said they don't want to ban Stealth Rocks because they would have to go back and redo every single article because the articles do damage typing based on Stealth Rocks damage output. Like it'll say so and so does X amount of damage, which is a guaranteed 2-hit knockout, after Stealth Rocks damage. That's the way their articles look. Everything is after Stealth Rocks or before Stealth Rocks. That's just kind of the way all of their damage is looking. They use Stealth Rock as an extension to their damage output, which is not how the move was supposed to be used. So when it comes time to put things up to ban it, they say, well, we can't ban it because it would be a complex ban. Yet they banned any evasion move. They banned Swagger. These are complex bans. They say they don't ban things like abilities and stuff like that, but they banned Moody. So they can clearly ban this move. They simply just don't want to because, well, they like it. And just recently they added to the ladder, no Scald can be used in OU. And that kind of got me thinking. It's like, well, they used to have a Stealth Rockless OU ladder. They probably removed it because people simply just didn't like it. They liked their Stealth Rocks. But the whole Scald thing just got me thinking. If you watch VGC battles or any type of other battle, people use nothing but physical attackers. That's their entire meta. Physical attackers, because they're simply just the best attackers in the game. They don't get walled by Chansey or Blissey. And anything that resists their physical attacks still probably take 50% from it anyway. So they simply just want to ban anything that can burn them, because after all, a burn cripples a physical attacker. It pretty much makes them useless. So of course they're going to ban a move that bulky water types, which they don't like to begin with, can ban or can burn their physical attackers and make them useless while they sit there and just recover. So they can ban stuff like that. Sure, it's not a ban because they are not suspect testing Scald, but it's effectively a ban for OU. No one likes their physical attackers to get banned, so everyone is going to be playing on OU with no Scald because they simply don't want to deal with it. So why is it that I have to deal with Stealth Rocks? The one thing I tell Pokemon players is, regardless if you want to or not, you're playing in Smogon's meta. If you play in VGC, you're still playing in Smogon's meta. If you play anywhere else in any other format, you're still playing Smogon's meta because they they control every single format that the game controls. Of course, they're not officially recognized by Nintendo or Game Freak. They never will be. But their rules are so ingrained into the player base, everyone you play is going to be that way. You try to play Battle Spot, you might come across a noob, but anybody who wants to be competitive, or I can even say the entire competitive Pokemon community, goes to Smogon. That's simply just what it is. They are a community-driven base for the Pokemon game, and that, in my opinion, is kind of bad because when you say we're not banning Stealth Rocks because you can use one of your 24 move slots to get rid of it, and when I use a counter argument and say, well, you can use one of your 24 move slots to deal with my double team if you'll like Chansey, they say, well, that's different because of X reason and, or Y reason. Evasion isn't a real stat in the game, so, you know, blah, blah this and blah, blah that. And I'm like, well, if you don't have to use any of the many ways that Game Freak provides for you to deal with evasion through multiple attacks, you can simply haze it away, you can roar the Pokemon out, or you can be a douchebag and use Psych Up and copy the evasion. You can use a No Guard to always hit, or Keen Eyes to see through the ability, and the multiple of attacks that you have that have perfect accuracy, versus the only two ways you can remove Stealth Rocks, which aren't even guaranteed because Pokemon that can use it aren't very good at dealing with it. So that's basically how I feel about that. If you want to just set up a ladder, then do it. Return the OU no Stealth Rocks. Or put that same thing for every single ladder. Stealth Rocks ingrains itself deep into every single meta. It's not just OU, but every single meta uses Stealth Rocks. Even Little Cup uses Stealth Rocks because the damage from it is so good. And the reason I'm so against Stealth Rocks is in a competitive game that Pokemon wasn't before, but it is now, but in a competitive game, when you have something that discriminates against certain different types of Pokemon and favors other types of Pokemon, you create situations where the exact same Pokemon is being used. The rules for VGC pretty much banned anything in the Uber tier for the most part, and certain event Pokemon, because Game Freak and Nintendo claimed that we want to have a diverse playfield environment. We want to see multiple different types of Pokemon instead of just Mewtwo, Lugia, the big ones all the time. But we still see the exact same thing here. We always see Landorus. We always see Kangaskhan. We always see Bisharp. We are not seeing diversity. That's a big deal from this. So Nintendo is like, well, I guess that's it for the most part. They really don't want to do anything, and they don't want to do anything to shake up the community. But Smogon here, on the other hand, says, if something is too over-centralizing to the meta, then we get rid of it. They don't ban things just because they're broken. They ban things depending on its impact on the entirety of the meta. It's the reason some Pokemon get banned, because they're over-centralizing. I'm glad Greninja got banned to Ubers. Because one, he's incredibly fast, has the ability Protein, and has Life Orb. I mean, he's so fast. I think Greninja was probably the fastest attacker in the game. He had the ability to stab all of his moves. I think his max speed is 191, which is exceptionally fast. I mean, the only things that could probably stop it are Jolteon. I think that's pretty much it. And it has the ability to hold an item to increase its attack power. Greninja needed to go because its coverage was just too good. But here we have another move, which is Stealth Rock, that over centralizes the game. and they want to keep it and say, well, it's healthy for the meta because it keeps um, Dragon Knight in check, it keeps Charizard in check, it keeps Moltres in check, it keeps Volcarona in check. I'm like, a 50% HP loss is a check? I mean, that's not even a check. A check is something that keeps something in its place. Like, hitting power grass on my Vaporeon is a check to water types. It doesn't outright counter them, and it's not good in all situations. But it's kind of that thing, okay, this is going to check my opponent's Pokemon, but it's not going to prevent my opponent from using water types against me. It's just simply not going to do that. Stealth Rocks single-handedly removes a lot of Pokemon from the game. If it's weak to it, they don't use it. And that's something that I feel needs to be redone. I mean, this move is bannable. Let's take a look at some of the things it does. It removes over half of the Pokemon that can be used from any tier that Smogon has. A lot of Pokemon usage are like in low tiers simply because of Stealth Rocks. Moltres was what? Rarely used? That's because of Stealth Rocks. You remove Stealth Rocks, it probably goes up to like, it probably doesn't go to OU, but it can still be good in OU because it still checks things. But they simply just don't ban it. It's used on every single team. I mean, it got to the point to where anything that a team does is always based around Stealth Rocks. I mean, like, there's just no reason to not use Stealth Rocks. People even have suicide leads on their team for the purpose of setting up Stealth Rocks. That's how over-centralizing this move is. Almost every single Pokemon learns Stealth Rock. Like 80% of them do. That's not a real statistic. I'm just kind of throwing that out my ass. But that's what it feels like. That's how many Pokemon get Stealth Rock versus the things that can get Defog. The things that get Defog already can't take a hit to begin with. And Defog also removes your own hazards. I don't use hazards, so it's not a big deal. But let's say I had up 3 layers of spikes or toxic spikes. They're gone. Let's say I had a light screen or reflect. It's gone. It Defog places you at an advantage because you can't use certain moves. You can't use spikes. You can't use toxic spikes. You can't use reflect. You can't use light screen. I don't even think you can use other things like safeguard and whatever. I'm not sure what else it moves, but I know for a fact you can't use those. And the only thing you're doing is trying to get rid of your opponent's rocks, which they can just set up again. So now you have to build your team around things that you cannot use. Like, I like to use light screen, I like to use reflect, but I can't simply use it because of default. Their argument to me is well, you shouldn't be using Articuno, you shouldn't be using Moltres. I'm like, why not? Why can't I use a Pokemon that I like on a team because of Stealth Rocks? The fact that you're saying that means that, yes, okay, Stealth Rocks is a problem, and we should probably look at it. That would be the best thing to do. But instead, your response is simply just don't use Articuno. Use something that resists it. That's not simply how I play Pokemon. That's not how a lot of people play Pokemon. It's absurd that you're going to sit here and defend a move that's used once can do 50% to a Pokemon on the switch in. 25% is still way too much. Because that means any flying type can only switch in, what, 4 times? Unless they have an awkward EV spread, then they can switch in like 5 times. But that's still switching in on something and taking damage from rocks and an attack. This pretty much means I can't switch in something like a Pidgeot on an attack that it should be able to take but can't because of Stealth Rocks. I should be able to switch in Pidgeot on most grass attacks and maybe take 40%, but the fact that Stealth Rocks is in play means I'm taking, what, 65% just from that attack, that resisted attack. Now this means if I switch Pidgeot out, I simply can only switch it in one more time. And that's also going to place me at a disadvantage because priority is a very big thing. Anything can finish off a Pidgeot with 25% life left. And that's just kind of the way I feel about Stealth Rocks. Is you can't claim to have a balanced meta and allow such a move to exist when you ban other things that you feel are broken. Stealth Rocks is a broken attack. It over centralizes. The very fact that you can switch a Pokemon and lose 50% of life means that you should remove it. I'm trying to find like another example for this, and the closest thing I could think is of something that's not in Destiny, but what if they were to implement something in PvP that said, well, all Titans take 50% more damage whenever they get shot. To a person playing a Titan, they're gonna be like, well, how is this fair to me that I take 50% more damage than anything else that gets hit? So now I simply can't use my Titan on player versus player because I die twice as fast as any other character. Somebody can melee me, I die. They can shoot me once and I die. How is that fair to me? It's not fair. And I would simply make that same argument. No, you can't simply defend that. This isn't something you can defend. This is something that everybody should be at outrage about. But they simply just don't. Their arguments, like, for it are just completely bad. A person is like, well, how is that the player's fault that the person didn't have Stealth Rock advantage? There are some people who feel that Stealth Rock needs to go. There are some people that think it shouldn't go. Like we have a person here that's basically saying the person or the team that benefits the most from Stealth Rocks are defensive or stall teams. That's simply not the case because the physical attackers hit so hard now to where they almost like just don't mean anything. A wall will switch in, lose 12.5%. They're effectively at 85% of their health left. And they have to be able to deal with it. And somebody's saying, well, you know, it checks Volcarona, it checks Charizard Y. It's like, well, what about our Garchomp checks? Why can't we have like an Ice Rocks that makes Dragon Ice or Dragon Flying type Pokemon lose 50% of their health? Why can't we have a rock type that hits some of Smogon's more common attack types? Why don't we just see that? There's no reason for a move like Stealth Rocks to exist in any incarnation. If you want to have the move, then simply just make it deal common damage to everything across the board. I feel 6% is fair, but sure, you can put it up to 12.5%. That means Pokemon have a total of 8 switch-ins they can make. And it affects every Pokemon equally. It's not going to be like, well, some Pokemon can switch in 50 times just on rocks damage because they 4 times resisted. But for everything, or make it to where every time a Pokemon switch in, Stealth Rocks simply disappear. I think that's a balance change that the game should make because it makes the game more fair to all types. We want to have a game with diversity. We want to have a game with skill. We want to have a game where everything is more or less equal. You know, this isn't equal. You know, me switching my Articuno in and losing 50% of his life means that's one less thing I can do with it. I immediately have to go into Roost. That means I can't switch in Articuno to take an attack because it's going to automatically lose 50 on a switch in plus the 27 or 30% is going to take from the attack, meaning I can't Roost the next turn. That's basically all that means. Stealth Rocks needs to either go or be fixed through something Game Freak can do, or needs to be straight up banned from something Smogon can do. I can better debate this if I had more arguments around. I simply just don't have them. So, I mean, if you guys want to leave your comments on how you feel about Stealth Rocks, whether or not you defend it or you are opposed to it, then please let me know. I will give you my thoughts on it on another video because I can better respond to questions that people have if, you know, they're saying it and I can hear it. That's kind of basically what I want to do. But I'm going to end this here because I really don't know what else to talk about. So do that. Give me your comments. Leave them below. Be sure to show this video around to people. If you want to call me a noob or something like that, then I suggest you readjust how you play the game because you might learn something about yourself. And as always, thank you guys for watching my videos.